The screams echoed around the pool as Emma Johnson held his daughter's hand. Lily, the surrounding mothers, in expensive dresses and sunglasses, called their children out of the water as if an invisible threat had approached. "Get out of there, quick, don't touch her," said a blonde woman, pulling her terrified son away. The awkward silence was broken by venomous whispers. "She'll dirty the water. Imagine if she gets it on her skin." Emma breathed deeply, trying to control her anger, while Lily, still confused, looked around blankly. The little girl just wanted to swim. Her mother, however, knew that day would not be forgotten. Emma's gaze burned with indignation. Not just for herself, but for Lily's saddened gaze, which was beginning to dawn on her that the world could be cruel for no reason. "Please, Mommy, I just wanted to play," the girl said in a nearly choked whisper. Around her, mothers and fathers held their children close as if danger loomed before them. The scene was cruel, but no one imagined that the woman they were trying to exclude had the power to change each of their fates in a matter of days. Emma stood with dignity, even with tears in her eyes. He walked firmly, took Lily's towel, and wrapped her in his arms. "We don't need this, darling," he murmured. But deep inside, a decision had already been made. The humiliation would be returned, not with hatred, but with a truth so unforgiving that those same neighbors would soon be at a loss. What had seemed like the lowest point of her life was about to become one of the biggest shocks in that upscale community. Days before that incident, Emma lived a seemingly ordinary routine. To her neighbors, she was just another resident, discreet and elegant, who had recently moved in with her daughter. No one there knew much about her personal life. They simply assumed, due to deep-rooted prejudice, that she didn't fit their own standards. Emma liked silence and avoided unnecessary conversation, preferring to spend weekends alone with Lily. But behind this discretion lurked a grand story that no one would dare imagine. In fact, Emma was CEO of Empire Real Estate, the largest real estate company in the country, responsible for the most luxurious and sought-after condominiums. With intelligence, vision, and hard work, she had built a billion-dollar empire internationally recognized. However, she never boasted about it. For her, what mattered was ensuring Lily's safety and future, always remaining true to her origins and values. What her neighbors saw as just another black woman was, in reality, the mastermind behind many of the places they themselves dreamed of living. Prejudice, however, was nothing new to Emma. From a young age, she knew how cruel the world could be to people like her. She'd felt suspicious looks in business meetings, been underestimated in multi-million-dollar negotiations, and heard whispered comments about her skin color and abilities. But Emma learned to turn every humiliation into fuel, and it was precisely this fuel that propelled her to the top. What she didn't expect was to face the same hatred, so raw and unmasked, in the place that should have been her and her daughter's home. On that sunny Sunday, everything seemed perfect for Lily. The little girl had woken up early asking to swim in the pool. "It'll be fun, Mommy," she said, smiling. Emma hesitated for a moment, but eventually relented, thinking it might be an opportunity for Lily to socialize. However, when they arrived at the play area, Emma noticed the immediate stares. Whispers began before her daughter even dipped her toes in the water. It was as if their presence was a nuisance to the other residents. Lily, oblivious to everything, dove in excitedly. Her laughter echoed through the pool, filling the air with childlike joy. It was then that the parents' discomfort turned to action. One by one, they began calling their children, with hurried gestures and tense voices. "Come out now. Come out now," ordered a man in designer shorts while his wife glared at him with prejudiced eyes. Emma noticed everything, and each gesture was like a knife in her heart. They weren't just pushing her children away. They were pushing her daughter away. The voices became more direct. A tall, arrogant woman said loudly, "If my son stays there, he'll get that black skin. I won't allow it." Quiet laughter followed the sentence as if it were just an innocent joke. But it wasn't. It was cruel. It was inhumane. Emma was silent for a few seconds, watching Lily emerge from the pool with tears in her eyes. Her daughter's innocence had been wounded, and there was nothing more painful for a mother. The walk to the apartment was silent, only the sound of Lily's little footsteps echoing alongside Emma's. But deep down, Emma wasn't silent. She was determined. "They don't know who I am. They have no idea," she thought. It wasn't just about pride, but about showing that her daughter's dignity would not be compromised. Those who humiliated her would learn a lesson so profound that they would never dare repeat that behavior with anyone else. That same night, Emma called her trusted lawyer, Michael Harris. "It's time." "I want this whole condo," he said firmly. On the other end of the line, a respectful silence followed. Michael knew that when Emma made a decision, nothing could stop her. And so began the process that would change the lives of those neighbors forever. While the residents were still whispering about the woman who dirtied the pool, they had no idea that they would soon be living on her property. Emma spent the week watching, planning, and waiting. Every encounter in the hallways, every sidelong glance, every comment disguised as a joke only reinforced her conviction. Lily's humiliation would not go unnoticed. But Emma wouldn't retaliate with insults. She would retaliate with power, with justice, and with a shock so great that it would strip away from each of those residents the pride that made them believe they were superior. The sun reflected off the crystal clear waters of the condominium pool when the most horrific scene unfolded. Emma Johnson, with her 8-year-old daughter Lily, had come down for a simple moment of leisure, believing she could live the normal life of any family. However, the girl's innocent smile was quickly crushed by a hostile environment. The mothers and fathers in designer clothes and haughty looks stood up almost in unison, calling out to their children as if facing an invisible danger. Emma watched in disbelief as people hurriedly pulled the children from the water, as if her daughter's presence threatened the purity of the place. "Quick, get out of there," shouted a blonde woman, grabbing the arm of the boy who still didn't understand the reason. Emma took a deep breath, fighting the rage burning inside. The silence that followed was even more deafening, broken only by venomous whispers and muffled laughter. Some pointed discreetly at Lily, who, uncomprehending, remained in the pool waving her arms happily. But when she realized she was alone in the water, her innocence gave way to a look of confusion and fright. The girl swam toward the edge, not understanding why everyone had moved away from her. It was at that moment that an arrogant voice echoed through the space. "If my son stays there, he'll get that dark skin." "I won't allow it," declared one of the residents, tall and well-groomed, with sunglasses that hid her eyes but not the malice of her words. Complicit laughter erupted around her, as if this statement were acceptable. Emma felt each syllable like a blade cutting through her dignity. Her daughter, now outside the pool, looked at her with tears welling up. The mother's heart clenched, not out of shame, but because she saw the world stealing the purity of childhood from her daughter in a single stroke. Emma wrapped Lily in a towel, her firm movements masking the turmoil raging inside her. "We don't need this, dear," she murmured softly as the girl buried her face in her lap. The silence in the play area was absolute, not from the lack of sound, but from the weight of exclusion. The neighbors whispered, but none dared approach. Everyone backed away as if Emma and Lily were carrying something contagious. And yet the mother held her head high. The public humiliation was complete. But Emma knew that wouldn't be the last word in this story. As she walked to the apartment, each step felt heavier than the last. Lily's gaze, still filled with questions, burned inside her mind. "Mommy, why don't they want to play with me?" the girl asked softly. Emma held her hand tighter and replied in a firm but pained tone, "Because they don't understand the value of who you are. But one day they will." The elevator ascended slowly, and Emma stared at her reflection in the interior mirror. There stood the woman who, to those neighbors, was just a stranger. They had no idea who she really was. This wasn't the first instance of racism Emma had faced, but seeing her daughter targeted with such cruelty was unbearable. She remembered her own childhood, when she had also been excluded from school games and called nicknames that still stung. She had always believed that by reaching the top of her career, she would have the power to protect Lily from experiencing something similar. But now, faced with the stark reality, she realized that no amount of money or social standing were enough to shield a child from prejudice. And this made her even more determined. The condominium where they lived was one of the most luxurious in the city. It had heated pools, 24-hour security, multi-sport courts, and impeccable party rooms. It was the kind of place where families flaunted their status, but hid their prejudices behind practiced smiles. Emma had bought her apartment there without a second thought, believing it would be a safe and comfortable environment for Lily. However, what she found were neighbors ready to judge her simply because of the color of her skin. And now, faced with the public humiliation, she felt the weight of her mistake in believing that money alone could buy respect. Emma always maintained a low profile. She avoided social gatherings, rarely attended condominium meetings, and preferred to keep her private life hidden from prying eyes. To her neighbors, she was just another resident of unknown origin, who had likely saved her entire life to afford to live there. They never imagined that behind this woman was the CEO of the largest real estate company in the country, owner of developments that many of them could never even dream of buying. Prejudice blinded them to the point that they couldn't see beyond the color of her skin. In the apartment, Lily was still crying softly, curled up on the sofa. Emma approached, stroked her daughter's hair, and said softly, "You are beautiful, you are strong, and none of this will change who you are." But inside, Emma was waging a battle. Her maternal instinct screamed for justice. It wasn't just about responding to prejudice, but about ensuring her daughter would never experience something like this again. It was at that moment that an idea began to form, a silent plan that grew from pain and blossomed into determination. Emma stood up, grabbed her cell phone, and made a short call. "Michael, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. It's urgent." On the other end, her trusted lawyer simply replied in a serious tone, "I'll be there, Emma, what happened?" She didn't want to explain over the phone, simply saying, "They'll learn a lesson they'll never forget." She hung up the phone, took a deep breath, and looked at Lily, who was now sleeping exhausted. The scene at the pool replayed in her mind like a painful movie, but at the same time, it fueled her resolve to completely change the fate of that place. In the silent dawn, Emma remained awake, sitting at her desk reviewing her company's documents. It was there that she remembered the strength she had built over the years. She wasn't just a woman who had been humiliated. She was the leader of an empire. The prejudice she suffered that day would be met not with words, but with actions capable of shattering all who disrespected her. Her neighbors thought the pool was theirs. Little did they know that soon, the entire condominium, every brick and every square foot, would be under Emma Johnson's control. That night, a silent promise was made. Emma would not allow Lily to grow up believing she was worth less than any other child. She would not let the poison of racism steal the shine from her daughter's smile. And above all, she would show every arrogant neighbor that prejudice was not only immoral, but also had consequences. What began as a day of leisure would end as the beginning of a revolution within that luxury condominium. And Emma already knew. No one would emerge unscathed from the lesson she was about to teach. From the first day Emma and Lily moved into the condominium, the dirty looks began to appear. As they unloaded moving boxes, neighbors discreetly stopped on their balconies to watch. There was no warm welcome, just heavy silences and whispers. Some of the more friendly staff tried to help, but were quickly rebuked by the residents. "Don't mingle too much," an elderly resident told the doorman in a low voice but loud enough for Emma to hear. That was the first warning that despite the luxury surroundings, she wasn't truly welcome. Over the next few days, Emma noticed Lily encountering barriers to making friends. At the playground, children played in close groups, but when Lily approached, parents quickly called their children away. "It's time to go, honey," they'd say, even when they'd just arrived. Lily, innocent, would ask, "Why did they leave, Mommy?" Emma would smile tenderly and reply, "They must be busy, my love." But deep down she knew the real answer was crueler than an 8-year-old could bear. Prejudice wasn't limited to social interactions. It seeped into small everyday gestures. In the elevator, neighbors clutched their bags tighter when Emma entered, as if facing a threat. In the hallways, greetings were cold, almost non-existent, and smiles faded when they realized who the person in front of them was. Emma, accustomed to this kind of attitude in the business world, managed to stand her ground. But seeing Lily try in vain to reach out to other children, the weight of exclusion became unbearable. One Saturday morning, Emma took Lily to the party room for a neighbor's birthday celebration. She'd been invited only because the invitation list included everyone. When they arrived, silence fell. Conversation ceased for a few seconds until the hostess approached with a forced smile. "Oh, I'm so glad you came," she said, but her look said otherwise. During the party, no one approached them. The children played together but ignored Lily as if she were invisible. Emma watched from afar, her heart aching but not wanting to ruin her daughter's moment. However, Lily soon realized it. As she tried to approach a group playing ball, she heard one of the boys say, "She can't play, she's different." The words were quick, but they struck like an arrow. Emma stood up immediately, walking over to her daughter and taking her hand. "It's okay, my love. Let's go," she said calmly, but her eyes betrayed the pent-up fury. That party ended early for them, but the wound left by their rejection only grew. It was the second warning that something more serious was yet to come. Despite everything, Emma tried to remain hopeful. She believed that, with time, her neighbors might change their ways. She remained smiling and polite in occasional encounters, responding to cold greetings with kindness. It was her way of showing Lily that dignity could never be taken away by anyone. But behind the scenes, cruel comments circulated. One neighbor even said at the beauty salon, "It's amazing how they let just anyone live here now." These phrases, repeated in whispers, were like poison slowly spreading through the air of the condominium. Lily, increasingly attentive, began asking difficult questions. "Mommy, why doesn't anyone want to play with me? Is it because I'm different?" Emma took a deep breath before answering. "You're special, Lily. They don't understand yet, but one day they will." However, the girl could already sense the rejection in every detail. Her spontaneous smiles gave way to sad looks, and trips to the playground became less and less frequent. Emma, watching her daughter lose her joy, felt anger growing within her. It wasn't just about her. It was about protecting her little girl from the cruelty that was taking hold all around. The culmination of this escalation came one weekend, when Emma and Lily decided to go to the pool for the first time. Emma hesitated, remembering all the previous experiences, but gave in to her daughter's insistent request. "It'll be fun, Mommy, I promise." Once they arrived, once again the stares began. Some mothers whispered, others stared openly. Lily, excited, ran to dive in, sending laughter rippling through the room. For a few minutes, Emma thought she might be wrong, that perhaps this was a normal moment. But soon she noticed the first signs of discomfort between the parents. One of the men approached the edge, calling urgently to his son. "Get out of there, quick!" he said, his voice thick with anxiety. The boy, confused, didn't want to leave, but eventually obeyed. Other parents repeated the gesture as if a silent order had been given. Emma watched, her heart racing, but still in disbelief at what she was about to witness. The looks on Lily were pure contempt, and the whispers grew louder. "I can't believe she let her daughter in there," a woman said, shaking her head. The venom of prejudice was about to reveal itself in its cruelest form. Emma, who had been trying to remain calm until then, began to feel her breath hitch. Every gesture of rejection towards her daughter felt like an invisible punch. "Mommy, why are you leaving?" Lily asked innocently. Emma smiled slightly, trying to hide it, but couldn't answer. He knew the situation would explode in seconds. The silence between the neighbors turned into a silent chorus of hostility, and the tension in the air was almost palpable. Emma could already sense that something momentous was about to happen, something that would change their lives forever. And then, the sentence that cut through the air like a knife was uttered. A mother, loud and unafraid of being overheard, declared, "If my son stays there, he'll get this black skin." The entire pool seemed to freeze. What had previously been mere discomfort turned into public humiliation. Nervous giggles erupted among some adults, while others simply looked away, unable to face the shame of what had just been said. Emma felt her legs tremble, but she maintained her posture. She held Lily's towel tightly, beckoning her out of the pool. The third warning had come, and this one could not be ignored. With Lily by her side, her hair still wet and her eyes teary, Emma walked slowly out of the playground. Each step was accompanied by the judgmental stares of her neighbors, who exchanged knowing glances. For them, it was just another moment of exclusion, something they believed would never have consequences. For Emma, however, it was confirmation that a line had been crossed. The racism that had always lurked beneath the surface was now exposed, raw and undeniable. And this would be the spark that would ignite everything that followed. At that moment, the escalation of the conflict reached a point of no return. Emma wasn't just hurt, she was determined. Prejudice would not go unpunished, and her daughter would not be raised believing the world could crush her dignity without response. The luxury condominium, which prided itself on its exclusivity, was about to discover it had humiliated the wrong person. And the silent war that had begun with sidelong glances and malicious whispers would now escalate into an open battle, where power and truth would change everything forever. The night after the pool scene was one of the longest of Emma's life. Lily cried softly, curled up on the couch, unable to understand the reason for so much contempt. The girl, who until then believed the world was a place of play and laughter, began to feel the weight of rejection. Emma, sitting nearby, stroked her hair and offered comforting words, but her heart was bleeding inside. A mother's pain was not only for the humiliation she had suffered, but for seeing her daughter's innocence ripped away so cruelly. In the following days, the isolation became even more evident. Lily avoided asking to go down to the playground or play in the pool. Her eyes, once full of joy, were now lost in emptiness. She preferred to stay home watching cartoons or reading books, as if she had given up trying to connect with other children. Emma noticed the change in her daughter's behavior, and every silence she gave her felt like a cry of pain to her mother. Social exclusion had not only left its mark on the girl, it had planted the seed of insecurity. Emma tried to encourage Lily not to let herself get down. "You're amazing, my love. They don't know what they're missing." But her daughter responded with short sentences, avoiding eye contact. One night, the little girl finally revealed her feelings. "Mommy, I wish I was white. Then they would play with me." These words were like knives piercing Emma's soul. She fought back tears, hugged Lily tightly, and replied firmly, "Never say that. Your color is beautiful. It's who you are. And you should never be ashamed of it." Despite the words of encouragement, Emma also faced her own silent suffering. Walking through the hallways of the condominium was like navigating a minefield of stairs. Mothers chatted in groups, but when they saw her approaching, they stopped talking and walked away. Some fathers pretended to be busy with their phones to avoid catching her eye. The air felt heavy, as if the entire environment was pushing her out. And even though she owned an empire, Emma felt like a stranger in her own home. The prejudice manifested itself in increasingly cruel details. One day, when she arrived at the party room to reserve a birthday date for Lily, the condominium receptionist responded coldly, "Unfortunately, we don't have any vacancies for that period." Minutes later, one of the blonde mothers showed up and easily secured a reservation for the same date. Emma sensed the contempt hidden in this unequal treatment, but chose not to argue. She knew any word she said would be used against her, as if she were overreacting. The silence, however, weighed more heavily than any shout. Lily began to withdraw at school as well. Once engaging and smiling, she now kept her distance, avoiding contact with her classmates. Concerned, the teachers called Emma in to talk. "She seems sadder, quieter," they said. Emma didn't tell her about the incidents in the condominium, but she knew exactly where the problem originated. Racism hadn't stayed within the walls of the building. It had infiltrated her daughter's mind, undermining her confidence. Emma left meetings with a lump in her throat, knowing she needed to act before it was too late. The nights were the worst. Emma listened to Lily sobbing in her room, trying not to make a sound so as not to worry her mother. But Emma heard everything, and each sob was a stab. She sat on her daughter's bed, held her, and whispered, "I'm here. Nothing can separate us." Still, the pain lingered. No hug could erase the cruelty Lily had endured. The child's isolation was a direct reflection of the adult's cruelty, and Emma felt that if she didn't do something, she would forever lose her daughter's trust in the world. While Lily suffered in the silence of her stolen childhood, Emma carried the weight of powerlessness. Considered one of the most powerful women in business in the country, Emma couldn't protect her daughter from something as basic as playing in peace. This contradiction tormented her night after night. As CEO, she closed million-dollar contracts and made decisions that changed the fates of entire families. But as a mother, she felt powerless to stop looks and words from poisoning Lily's heart. This wound became fuel for the coming revolution. One afternoon, Emma took Lily to the mall to try to cheer her up. She bought a new dress, took her out for ice cream, and they watched a movie together. For a few hours, joy returned to the girl's face. But on the way back, as they passed the condominium pool, Lily lowered her head and squeezed her mother's hand tightly. She didn't say anything, but the gesture spoke volumes. That place had become a space of pain, a symbol of rejection. Emma understood her daughter's silence and vowed to transform that scenario into something completely different. Isolation also began to affect Emma emotionally. Alone, she spent hours reflecting on her life and her achievements. She recalled every obstacle she faced because of her skin color, every closed door, every whispered comment. She thought of her mother, who always said, "The world will try to break you, but never let them steal your essence." These words echoed in her mind like a call. She couldn't give in to suffering. She needed to transform that pain into strength, not just for herself, but especially for Lily. Yet there were times when the pain seemed greater than her strength. Emma wept in secret, locked in the bathroom so Lily wouldn't see her. The tears flowed silently, filled with anger, sadness, and helplessness. "How long?" she asked herself in the mirror. Her reflection showed a strong woman, but inside she felt shattered. Yet deep down something remained intact. The certainty that this story wouldn't end in humiliation. It was just the beginning of a turning point that would bring all her neighbors to their knees. And it was in this setting of pain and isolation that the seed of justice began to germinate. Emma knew she couldn't erase what Lily had experienced, but she could transform that space of exclusion into a place of pride. It wasn't just about proving a point. It was about teaching her daughter that dignity is not negotiable. The suffering had reached its limit, and now it gave way to determination. The humiliation in the pool wouldn't be the end, but rather the trigger for a turnaround that would forever change the fate of the condominium and everyone who lived there. The cruelest episode happened one Sunday morning, when Emma decided to take Lily down to the pool again. She had avoided that place for weeks, but her daughter, in a shy voice, asked, "Mommy, I want to try again, just one more time." Emma hesitated, but the girl's hopeful look convinced her. "Okay, my love, let's go." She believed that perhaps in time the neighbors would have reflected on their actions, but what he found that day was an even more painful spectacle of humiliation. As soon as they arrived, stares immediately gathered. Some parents whispered, others just stared with contempt. Lily took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and dove into the pool. For a few moments, the sound of the water and the children's laughter created the illusion of normalcy. Emma, sitting on a lounge chair, tenderly watched her daughter having fun. But the calm was short-lived. One of the mothers, in a loud theatrical voice, shouted, "Get your children out of here now." I can't believe she came back here as if nothing had happened. The impact was immediate. Children rushed out of the water, pulled by nervous arms. The sound of cries and complaints mixed with the hurried footsteps. Emma stood up, indignant, but before she could say anything, one of the men from the condominium spoke up. "This is a family space, not a place for people like that. You should find another place to swim with your daughter." The silence that followed was even heavier. Lily, confused, remained in the water, trying to understand why everyone was looking at her as if she were a monster. "Get out of there now, Lily," Emma said, her voice cracking. The girl climbed out of the pool, tears streaming down her face, her small shoulders hunched in shame. "I just wanted to play, Mommy," he whispered, clutching the towel to his wet body. Another mother's cruel comment pierced the air like venom. "This isn't our fault. If you want to blend in so badly, go to a club, not our apartment complex." Evil giggles echoed, as if Emma and Lily's pain were a source of entertainment. Emma felt her blood boil, but she maintained her composure. "You should be ashamed of yourselves. You're teaching your own children the worst of this world," she said firmly. But instead of embarrassed silence, the response was even crueler. "Ashamed? You should be ashamed, thinking you can be on the same level as us," a man retorted, crossing his arms arrogantly. The final blow came when someone muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That's why this place is declining in quality." Lily, unable to bear it, began to cry openly. Emma hugged her tightly, trying to shield her from all those stares, but there was no way to protect her completely. The humiliation was already etched in her mind. The moment of leisure had become an exposed wound in front of dozens of witnesses. Emma breathed deeply, holding back tears, but indignation grew like a fire in her chest. It wasn't just about racism, it was about cruelty, about seeing adults use their social position to crush an innocent child. Emma then stood up, Lily in her arms, and walked firmly toward the pool exit. Eyes followed her, some filled with contempt, others with complicit silence. None, however, showed any sign of regret. On the contrary, there was a sense of victory among the residents, as if they had reaffirmed the exclusivity of the space. But what they didn't know was that at that very moment, Emma was already planning her response. There would be no forgetting, no forgiveness. The extreme injustice had crossed the line, and she would never let it go unpunished. When they arrived at the apartment, Lily ran to her bedroom and locked herself in. Emma remained alone in the living room, breathing deeply, trying to maintain control. They messed with the wrong person, she thought. The phone on her desk seemed to be calling her. She grabbed it firmly and called Michael, her lawyer, again. "I want this entire condo. No matter the price, it's a matter of principle." On the other end of the line, Michael was silent for a few seconds before replying, "Understood. I'll get everything ready." War had officially been declared. In the following days, Emma noticed that the humiliation didn't stop at the pool. The whispers intensified in the hallways. Some neighbors deliberately shouted just so she could hear, "I don't know how they let these people buy apartments here." Others laughed as if it were a joke. Every word was a reminder that they didn't see her as an equal, but as an intruder. Emma, however, kept her expression firm. Inside, she planned her silent revenge. And this time it would be revenge with the weight of law, power, and property. Lily, meanwhile, became increasingly isolated. She spent hours in her room drawing. Many of the drawings depicted an empty pool, a girl alone in it. Emma, seeing this, felt her heart break. There was no denying it. The humiliation had already left deep scars on her daughter. But instead of letting herself be discouraged, she used that pain as fuel. She needed to show Lily that dignity was non-negotiable. She needed to prove to everyone in that condominium that the color of her skin didn't define her worth. One day, as she was riding down the elevator, Emma overheard a conversation between two neighbors, who were talking without noticing her presence. Did you see how embarrassed she was at the pool? It was actually funny. Who does she think she is, trying to blend in here? Their laughter was cut short when they realized Emma was behind them. She said nothing, just stared into their eyes. The awkward silence lasted until the elevator door opened. Emma left without a word, but inside she swore, "You're going to eat every syllable of that arrogance." The extreme injustice was complete. It wasn't just an isolated incident, but a system of exclusion, a web of prejudice that eroded Emma's dignity and destroyed Lily's innocence. The condominium, which should have been a home, had become a battlefield. But contrary to what the residents thought, Emma wasn't a helpless victim. She was a woman who had built an empire with sweat and intelligence. And now she would use that power not only to exact revenge, but to teach a lesson that would resonate throughout the community. And so, from the depths of pain, an unshakable resolve was born. Emma would not let humiliation be the last word. The neighbors who had laughed, humiliated, and taught their own children to reject her would soon learn that the woman they had scorned was far more powerful than they could have imagined. The extreme injustice had become the trigger for a revolution, and the luxury condominium, which prided itself on its exclusivity, would soon be forced to kneel before the most unexpected truth of all. Emma Johnson was the true master of that world. The atmosphere in the condominium had become unbearable. Emma and Lily no longer went unnoticed anywhere. Every step they took was accompanied by glances, whispers, and malicious giggles. But the situation reached its breaking point when a residents' meeting was organized, called by some parents. The official topic was pool maintenance, but in practice everyone knew the real reason for the meeting. Emma reluctantly decided to attend. She knew she would have to face head-on the glares of those who had humiliated her daughter. Upon entering the hall, silence was immediate. The residents exchanged glances, some with ironic smiles, others with cold expressions. Emma sat up straight, staring intently at everyone. Lily remained at home, shielded from the scene. The building manager, a middle-aged man named Richard Collins, he cleared his throat before beginning. "We're here to discuss issues that affect the harmony of our common space. Many residents have been feeling uncomfortable." The tone of his voice already betrayed the meeting's target. Emma knew the word disturbance had a specific purpose. One of the mothers stood up, elegant in her expensive dress but with venom in her voice. "It's unacceptable that certain residents use the pool without respecting the tradition and quality of our condominium." Complicit giggles spread throughout the room. Emma remained silent, simply observing. Another woman added, "It's nothing personal, but our children can't be exposed to certain situations." The dramatic pause made it clear she was referring to Lily. The weight of prejudice hung in the air, suffocating, like a fog impossible to ignore. Emma raised her hand, asking to speak. "So you're saying my daughter can't use the pool because she's black?" she asked firmly. The entire room murmured, some avoiding eye contact, but it was one of the parents who found the courage to respond bluntly. "Exactly. It's not discrimination, it's just common sense. This space is to preserve everyone's quality of life." The words were met with nods of agreement. Emma felt her heart race, but she kept it under control. She knew this was the height of cruelty. "You're teaching your own children that racism is normal," Emma retorted, standing up. Her voice echoed through the room, filled with firmness and indignation. But instead of reflection, she received discreet boos and low comments. "She just wants to show off," someone said. "She doesn't fit our standards," another added. It was a collective attack, as if each one wanted to place more weight on her shoulders. Emma, alone before dozens of hostile faces, felt surrounded. But inside her, something burned even brighter, the determination to give the right answer. The scene became even more tense when the building manager tried to make the exclusion official. "In light of the complaints, we suggest that Mrs. Johnson limit pool use to off-peak times when there are no other children." The proposal was applauded by many. Emma looked around in disbelief, realizing that the prejudice wasn't just individual but institutionalized. They were trying to regulate her daughter's exclusion, as if it were something natural. The climax of injustice had been cemented. It was the moment when anyone could break. But Emma wasn't just anyone. She took a deep breath, looked at every face there, and replied, "You have no right to tell me where my daughter can or cannot be. She has the same right as any other child in this complex." Her voice was so firm that the room fell silent for a few seconds, but soon the laughter returned, muffled, full of contempt. "She still thinks she's just like us," a man whispered in the back. Emma felt her hands tremble, but she didn't let herself be discouraged. She was facing the darkest, but also the most decisive moment of her life in that place. One of the more aggressive neighbors stood up and pointed directly at her. "If you're not happy, you can move. No one will miss you." The comment was met with murmurs of approval. It was a veiled expulsion, the final verdict of a community that considered itself the owners of the space. Emma looked at everyone with tears held back, but also with the flame of revenge burning in her eyes. They believed they had won. They didn't know they were paving their own ruin at that very moment. As she left the room, Emma felt her breath catch. The air felt thick, charged with hatred, but at the same time there was a strange sense of clarity within her. That meeting had not only sealed Lily's exclusion, but also sealed the fate of all the residents. They think they have power. They don't know who they messed with, she thought. The climax of grief was about to become the beginning of the most unexpected turn of events the luxury condominium had ever witnessed. Arriving home, she found Lily on the couch, hugging one of the drawings she had made. The little girl ran to her and asked, "Mommy, did they let me play in the pool again?" Emma hugged her daughter tightly, tears finally flowing. "Not yet, my love. But that will change. I promise." The promise wasn't just to Lily, but to herself. Never again would she allow her daughter's pain to be laughed at. Never again would she allow her dignity to be treated as disposable. The climax was not only the height of humiliation, but the trigger for revolution. Emma knew she couldn't change the hearts of all those neighbors with words, but there was something she could do, completely change the fate of the condominium. It wouldn't just be revenge, it would be a lesson etched in the history of that place. And when everyone discovered who she really was, the mask of superiority would fall, revealing the emptiness behind the arrogance. The turning point was closer than they ever imagined. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She spent hours in front of the computer, analyzing contracts, reviewing documents, and planning every detail. The injustice that had reached its climax would be met with power, justice, and the naked truth. The residents who had evicted her, humiliated her, and laughed at her daughter would soon realize that the pool, the lounge, and every inch of that condominium no longer belonged to them. They belonged to Emma Johnson, and this revelation would be the most devastating turn of events they could imagine. The morning after the meeting was marked by unusual activity in the condominium. Moving trucks began arriving, various security. Guards patrolled the gates, and a team of administrators entered the main lobby. Residents watched from their balconies, confused. Some called the building manager, others whispered among themselves, trying to understand what was happening. Emma, calm, watched from her apartment window, with Lily by her side. Her daughter, curious, asked, "Mommy, why are there so many strange people here?" Emma smiled and replied, "Because the tables have turned, honey. The tables have finally turned." In the middle of the afternoon, all residents were summoned to an extraordinary meeting. The notice, delivered to the doors of each apartment, bore the signature of Empire Real Estate. Many frowned. "What does this company have to do with us?" they asked. Others, more informed, knew it was the largest real estate developer in the country. The room filled with curious, anxious, and at the same time, apprehensive people. Richard, the building manager, seemed lost, unable to understand how someone had taken over the management without consulting him. When the doors opened, silence fell. Emma walked in wearing an elegant black suit, her posture firm and her gaze implacable. Behind her were lawyers, advisors, and Michael Harris himself. The whispers began immediately. What is she doing here? Could she have been called too? Emma walked to the center of the room and stepped onto the small stage where the building manager normally stood. She calmly took the microphone, waited for the silence to settle, and then said, "Good afternoon. My name is Emma Johnson. I'm the CEO of Empire Real Estate. And from today onwards, this condominium belongs to me." The shock was instantaneous. A murmur of disbelief ran through the room, followed by expressions of sheer astonishment. Richard tried to intervene, laughing nervously. "Is this some kind of joke? This condo isn't for sale." Emma, with a slight smile, held up a folder full of documents. "Here are the deeds. I purchased every unit, every common space, every square foot. You are now tenants of my company, and I decide who can and cannot stay here." The silence that followed was absolute. The mothers who had humiliated Lily exchanged desperate glances. The man who had asked Emma to move out went pale, unable to speak. Their world, built on a false sense of superiority, had crumbled in seconds. Emma continued, "You thought you were putting me down, but I was just watching, waiting for the right moment. Today you all find out who's really in charge." Her voice echoed through the room like a gavel in a courtroom. One of the mothers, trying to regain her composure, stood up and said, "This can't be legal, it can't be true." Emma looked directly at her, coldly. "It's completely legal, and it's completely true. Maybe you should have informed yourself before humiliating a child in front of everyone." The woman sat back down, embarrassed, while the other residents lowered their heads. The weight of the revelation was unbearable. The humiliation Emma had suffered was now reversed, reflected on every face in the room. Emma then looked at everyone and concluded, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to teach. Starting today, this community will be open to Black families, the families you so despise. People who deserve to live with dignity, without dirty looks, without exclusion. And you, if you want to stay here, will have to learn to live with diversity, because the time for arrogance is over." The words were like stabs, dismantling any remaining mask of superiority. Some tried to protest. "This will destroy the standard here," one man shouted. Emma responded without hesitation. "What destroys a place is not the color of people's skin. What destroys it is prejudice. And that, yes, will no longer be tolerated." The room filled with embarrassed murmurs. The neighbors who had previously laughed at Lily's pain were now forced to hear the stark truth. The shock was so great that some could not even look Emma in the eye. Arrogance had turned to fear and regret. Lily, who had been watching discreetly from the side of the stage, looked at her mother in admiration. For the first time, she understood that they were not alone, that they had strength. Emma bent down, took her daughter's hand, and said into the microphone, "All of this is for you, my princess, so that you will never again be ashamed of who you are." Tears streamed down the girl's face, but this time they were tears of pride. The audience, previously smug, now watched the scene in embarrassed silence, unable to react. The building manager, defeated, tried one last time to regain control. "This will cause problems for all of us." Emma stared at him firmly. "The problems already existed. You just never had the courage to face them." But now it's over. This place will no longer be a place of humiliation. The final silence was as heavy as the revelation itself. It was as if everyone was on trial, and Emma was the judge who had just handed down the sentence. The turnaround was complete. The woman who had been humiliated in front of everyone now revealed herself as the true owner of every brick in that condominium. The shock was irreversible, and more than that, the lesson had been taught. Racism, which once reigned free within the walls of luxury, now bowed before the most powerful truth. No one, no matter how prejudiced, can diminish someone who carries within themselves dignity and power. In the days following the revelation, the condominium was turned upside down. The hubbub in the hallways was unceasing, and many residents locked themselves in their apartments, embarrassed to leave. Some even tried to sell their properties in a hurry, but soon discovered that the final buyer in each transaction remained the same: Empire Real Estate. There was no way out. Emma Johnson was indeed the new mistress of that territory, and reality began to impose itself, like a wall impossible to circumvent. The transformation didn't take long. Black families began moving into the condominium. Children with wide smiles ran through the gardens, filling the previously cold space with a new energy. In the pool for the first time, Lily dove without fear. There were no more looks of contempt, only shared laughter. Some former residents watched from afar, silently. The shock still stung, but little by little they were forced to accept that the world they had created based on exclusion no longer existed. Emma observed each change with serenity. She didn't seek to humiliate her former neighbors, but to force them to live with the reality of diversity. When she passed them in the hallways, she maintained a firm, but never aggressive posture. Her strength lay in demonstrating that, despite all the pain, there was still dignity in her way of conducting everything. Example spoke louder than any speech, and it was impossible for the residents not to reflect on their own past attitudes. One morning, one of the mothers who had pulled her son out of the pool approached, visibly embarrassed. "Emma, I wanted to apologize. I was horrible to you and Lily." Emma stared at her for a few seconds in silence, evaluating the sincerity of her words. Finally, she replied, "It's not me you owe an apology to. It's my daughter. She's the one who suffered." The woman, with tears in her eyes, promised to talk to Lily, and that gesture, however small, represented the beginning of real change. Lily, meanwhile, was blossoming again. She no longer drew empty pools, but rather ones filled with diverse children. She ran through the hallways hand in hand with new friends, laughing loudly, as she should have from the beginning. Emma, seeing this, felt her heart finally at peace. The pain that had consumed her was now transformed into hope. "That's what I wanted for you, my daughter. A place where you could be who you are, without fear, without shame, without feeling inferior." Longtime residents, one by one, began to realize the weight of their actions. Some still resisted, but daily coexistence forced them to see the humanity they had previously denied. The pool, the scene of so much humiliation, had now become a symbol of equality. Whites and blacks swam together, sharing the same space, untouched by prejudice. The disapproving silence had disappeared, replaced by a harmony that had never existed there. Emma knew she wouldn't change everyone's hearts. Racism was too deep-seated to disappear overnight. But she believed that, at least in that condominium, she had planted a seed of coexistence, respect, and reflection. And above all, she had shown Lily that they should never accept less than full dignity. This was the true legacy she wanted to leave her daughter, the certainty that their worth would never depend on the eyes of others. One calm evening, Emma and Lily were sitting by the pool. The little girl looked at her mother and said, "Mommy, I like it here now. It feels like the water is lighter." Emma smiled, moved. "It's not the water that's changed, my love. It's the people. And when people change, the whole world becomes lighter." Lily laid her head on her mother's shoulder, and for a few moments the silence was more powerful than any words. Richard, the former building manager who had contributed so much to the exclusion, approached. His expression was haggard, a far cry from the previous arrogance. "Emma, I made a big mistake. I thought I was defending the condominium, but I was only destroying its most valuable asset, the people." Emma stared at him firmly, but calmly replied, "It was a big mistake, Richard. But only you can decide whether you'll remain attached to it or change." The man lowered his eyes, unresponsive but clearly moved by the reflection. The condominium, once a symbol of exclusivity and prejudice, was transformed into a space for collective learning. Every wall, every common space now carried a story that could no longer be forgotten. Arrogance had given way to reflection, and Emma and Lily's pain had become the driving force behind a transformation that would echo for a long time. The luxury of the place was no longer in the walls or the name, but in the lesson engraved in the memory of all who lived there. Emma concluded in her mind that revenge had never been her true goal. What she wanted was justice to ensure her daughter was proud of who she was. And in the end, she had achieved much more than that. She had transformed pain into power, prejudice into learning, and exclusion into unity. Her victory was not in owning the condominium, but in showing that dignity cannot be bought or sold, only lived. Emma and Lily's story spread beyond those walls. Others listened, reflected, and were inspired. And for those who still harbored prejudice in their hearts, the message was clear. Skin color should never be a reason for exclusion. Because in the end, what defines a place isn't its walls, but the people who inhabit it. And when these people learn to respect one another, even the coldest condominium can become a true home.